Tipped workers are 3 times more likely to live in poverty than the general workforce, 2 times more likely to be on SNAP or Medicaid, and a majority are women. So we know that when employees, to say nothing of raising the wage, this bill doesn't do anything to raise the wage. It doesn't do anything to require employers to pay more than they're already statutorily required to pay. But we can't forget that when a worker is not paid the wage that they're owed, it ends up being the taxpayers that make up for that lost wages in Medicaid and SNAP and other benefits that they qualify for. Research has shown that relying on a tipped wage exacerbates racial inequities for workers because customers of all races tend to tip black workers less than white workers. If the employer is not keeping track of how all employees are compensated, they keep payroll for wages but not for tips. Black workers are more likely to be the ones who will take home less than minimum wage, further entrenching existing systems of inequality. Workers across the state have told us that some employers are not following the current law, but due to vagueness of the statute, it's very difficult to track and enforce. I've introduced bills year after year to increase the tipped minimum wage. Senator Hansen introduced it in the past. It's been brought up, for decades here in Nebraska. And one common argument of the opposition is that, employers are required to pay up to $9 an hour, so there's no problem. But we hear testimony and we hear from people that the law isn't being followed by some employers, and this bill just puts a mechanism in place to make sure it is being enforced. The bill language was developed in collaboration with legal experts at Nebraska Appleseed and reflects an approximation of language from other states that have similar laws, drawing mostly from Missouri's statute. The tipped minimum wage has not been increased for over 30 years in Nebraska since 1991, and all recent efforts to do so have been unsuccessful. Yet the regular minimum wage has been increased 7 times since the last time the tipped wage was changed, and there's an effort underway now to increase it again. Every single neighboring state provides a better tipped wage than Nebraska does. With this bill, we're taking a very agreeable, minimal step by not increasing the tipped wage. We're just adding clarity and enforceability and due process to the existing law. This will contribute to more tipped workers being assured that they are receiving the wages they are owed, and it gives them the power to advocate for themselves if they are not. By providing sanctions for employers who violate the law, employers who aren't following the law can be held accountable. The pandemic put in stark relief the fact that our service industry workers are truly essential, and we all rely upon them to maintain the services and quality of life we enjoy and expect. Since the pandemic, 75% of tipped workers report their tips have decreased. Over half of all restaurant workers are saying they're leaving the industry. 8 in 10 workers say they will only stay if they receive a full livable wage plus tips. We keep hearing how the restaurant and other service-based industries are suffering from a loss of workforce. And here in Nebraska, where we have record low unemployment, restaurants are struggling to keep their doors open in many cases. If restaurants want to retain the workers that keep them open, the least we can do is make sure that the employees are being paid at least the minimum amount that they're legally entitled to. Because we've seen the alternative, and that's a service workforce that's continuing to dwindle as tipped workers opt to leave the industry entirely for better opportunities. Let's give a little more protection to the people working at these establishments we enjoy and make sure that they can stay in their jobs. The majority of employers who are already doing the right thing by paying their workers up to $9 an hour, they won't be harmed. This won't change any behavior that they have to make. And those who do not wish to comply will be hard-pressed to publicly assert that they won't comply with what's already existing law. This is one of those bills, we debate bills like this frequently, where we see what the law says, but there's misunderstanding about it, or there's no enforcement mechanism, or there's no due process included within it, and it leads to these unintended consequences, which is the law not being followed to the letter. And as I said, this doesn't do anything to increase the wage. It's just gives some peace of mind to workers who are, afraid that they may experience wage theft. And for employers who are not committing wage theft, they have nothing to worry about. Thank you. Let me remind, from both sides, let me remind the committee what this bill is really about. It's not saying anything about the values or morality of what the wage ought to be. It's not about values. It's not about what most businesses do already or what's already normal and the case. As long as there are workers in Nebraska who are coming to us and coming to the Department of Labor and saying, I'm experiencing wage theft, we see that we have an opportunity to solve a problem, right? And for the people who ask why is this type of bill needed, it really puts some clarification in statute that isn't currently there. For an individual to get any justice right now, they'd have to bring a legal action against their employer, probably in small claims court. And realistically, most people are just not going to do that. It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of resources, money to take legal action. And they'd have to hire an attorney or they'd have to represent themselves. And with this bill, LB1028, we authorize the Department of Labor to do that initial layer of investigation and oversight. And if they find that the complaint is credible, they can send it to a county attorney to determine if it should be prosecuted. With this bill, if you're an employer who steals your tipped employees' wages, you need to make them whole by paying a civil damage amount, and you can also be criminally sanctioned for wage theft. Currently, we don't have that. And we do know that wage theft happens in Nebraska. There's a recent example of tipped wage theft from 20th, 2021. The headline of this news release from the U.S. Department of Labor is, U.S. Department of Labor investigation results in Nebraska restaurant paying $145,987 in back wages and damages. And this was at an Omaha restaurant. So, this is because there was a U.S. Department of Labor investigation, but this isn't the kind of thing that we're seeing at the Department of Labor in Nebraska. I want to speak to Senator Gregert's question, if I understand it, and please correct me if I'm not addressing your question as you meant to ask it. It is already the law in Nebraska that we have to pay $9 an hour. Like, that's here. On page 3 of the Wage and Hour Act, which is already in statute, it says, every employer shall pay to each of his or her employees a minimum wage of $9 per hour. So that we already know. And it also says already the sum of wages and gratuities received by each person compensated by way of gratuities. So the sum of the wage and the tips they get shall equal or exceed the minimum wage provided in subsection 1 of this section, so $9 an hour. Nothing in this bill would make an employer pay more than $9 an hour. And I think it's very telling and weird if there are restaurants and employers that are opposed to this bill, because if you're following the law, there should be no problem with it. All it does is it makes it easier for employees that experience wage theft to get justice for that. And that's what opponents to raising the minimum wage have been telling me all these years is, well, wouldn't maybe a good compromise, something better would be just to give the Department of Labor the resources they need to prosecute wage theft, or we need to do more to prevent the wage theft. And I'm calling you on that. I'm saying, sure, here's your bill. This is going to do something about wage theft. It doesn't do anything about what the actual wage is, and it isn't making a values claim on what it should be. So it's just saying this is what the law is. Evidently, some employers are breaking the law, not most by a mile, but if even one Nebraskan experiences wage theft in our state and we can do something about it, why wouldn't we? Thanks.